Welcome and settle in as we take a quiet, unhurried walk into a place most people will never see, and even fewer would wish to linger in for long. Imagine yourself moving down, floor by floor, into the deep earth, where the rock folds around you like a heavy blanket, and the lights are patient and pale. Tonight, you will be visiting a deep geological repository where used nuclear materials and radiological histories rest in engineered alcoves, tucked into formations that have been steady for longer than human memory. This is not a place built for hustle or urgency. It is a place of quiet pressure, of salt that moves so slowly you cannot see it move, of air that hums with a low, soft breath. If you enjoy drifting into sleep with calm science, please like this video, subscribe, and feel free to use the playlist link in the description so the learning can continue gently in the background as you drift. How sleepy are you on a scale of 1 to 10? You find yourself at the mouth of an access shaft with walls that are clean and gently damp, as if they are still exhaling the memory of being cut. Behind you, on the surface, are pine trees and a sky you know well. In front of you, there is a slow elevator, calmly descending. Its cables are thick and sure, and as you step in, you notice a subtle fragrance in the air, a mixture of mineral dryness and a metallic hint of tools long at rest. The doors close with a careful sigh. The floor barely trembles. There is no rush. The elevator begins to sink toward the horizon of quiet rock, and you feel your breathing find the gentle rhythm of the descent. The walls of the shaft pass by in a steady glide. You see layers, bands, and seams that tell a story without raising their voice. There is a pale expanse here, a faint rust tint there, sometimes a glossy face where drilling water once flowed, and sometimes a matte patch that seems to absorb light. A small green lamp on a bracket sways slightly. Far above, the sunlit noise fades into a memory. Down here, time has a soft weight. You can feel it on your shoulders like a shawl, a calm reminder that some places belong to longer clocks. In many countries, engineers and geologists choose salt for repositories because salt is welcomingly predictable in its slowness. Imagine halite, common rock salt, that yields and flows without shattering, like a very slow candle rearranging itself. Caverns in salt tend to creep shut, not quickly, not menacingly, but with the inevitability of warm wax smoothing itself. That is one reason for selecting it. If a tunnel closes over centuries, the closures are gentle, the fractures self-healing, the pathways inward quieted by their own nature. You can picture the salt as a living archive of pressure, smoothing the edges of voids until they are once again part of the solid mass, folded into the enormous hush of the formation. Other places use claystone or granite. Each rock has its way of speaking softly over ages. Claystone holds water very reluctantly and swells to close pores. adding its own slow seal. Granite is stoic and strong, a deep, crystalline choir of minerals that resist the wandering of fluids. The point is not speed or excitement. The point is patience, redundancy, and the kind of quiet that outlasts seasons and cities. Tonight, you are a guest of this patience. You are here not for the drama that such topics sometimes attract, but for the tranquility in their careful design. When the elevator eases to a stop, the doors open onto a corridor that feels like a gallery carved out of time. The light is subdued and even. There are soft voices at your shoulder, but they are not voices at all, just the murmur of ventilation, the whisper of filters, the periodic, precise tick of a sensor registering temperatures and pressures that change only a little. The air is cool. Your footsteps, padded and respectful, echo in a very polite way. The floor is simple, a path that leads forward, turning gently, with no rush to anywhere. The gentle rhythm continues. Imagine reaching a junction where the main passage splits into smaller drifts. Each drift leads to a set of rooms, called emplacement rooms, where the engineered packages rest. The walls are smooth, where they have been cut with care, and rough, where the rock wishes to show its old texture. A thin sheen of dust sits in quiet corners like the softest powder on a shelf, unmoved by any draft. Small signs in clear, calming lettering mark the path, not loud, just present. They are reminders that this is both a workplace and a promise. A workplace for a little while, a promise for a very long while. The promise is to keep what is dangerous at arm's length from the living world until it is no longer dangerous. But even that idea is softened here. In the repository, one does not talk about danger in heated tones. One talks about barriers. The waste that arrives is not a loose, unpredictable thing. It has been stabilized, often vitrified into a glass that holds onto elements with a patient grip, and then placed in a robust canister, sometimes made of stainless steel, sometimes nested within copper, sometimes paired with liners that act like steady companions. Around the canister there is a buffer, often a clay called bentonite, which swells gently when it meets moisture, sealing spaces and slowing any stray traveller at a geological pace. The rock itself is the outermost quiet partner, holding all of this in patient arms. If you like, you can imagine one of these packages resting in its alcove. Smooth, rounded edges, materials selected not because they are glamorous, but because they behave in simple ways for long times. The surface is dull, not reflective, as if it prefers to be unnoticed. There are thermocouples set nearby, small wires that lead to instruments that do not fuss. They measure the warmth that comes from the quiet decay inside the package, warmth that rises and then ebbs over years and decades. The amount of heat is not frantic. It is more like the warmth of a hand resting on a stone, enough that the clay around it feels it and settles differently, enough that the air in the room speaks gently of it. but not so much that anything seems agitated. Out in the corridor, the ventilation slides along at a modest, unwavering pace. The steady breathing of the repository is comforting. Fresh air down, used air up, scrubbers standing by, filters that have their own routine that never hurries, lights on timers that prefer to be modest rather than bright, doors that swing with precise hinges and seals that sit carefully in their grooves. The more you look around, the more you see how everything exists in repeating, simple patterns. Sensors and their twins, signs and their twins, equipment stored in pairs, cable trays that run in parallel lines. Redundancy is not an emergency measure here. Redundancy is a lullaby. You think of the surface again, of trees shifting gently in wind, of clouds with their quiet dramas. Down here, the drama wraps itself into stillness. The rock does not hurry. The salt does not make a show of its movement. The concrete supports do not complain. They accept the weight and share it with one another. The gentle rhythm continues. You begin to understand the phrase you read earlier, that you would not wish to spend a day here. It is not a harsh place, not in this telling. It is simply a place for things that are not alive to grow older in peace. People, with their circadian clocks, with their need for sunlight and the green hint of leaves, are guests whose visits are short and careful. The repository is content to be without us most of the time. Imagine the long planning behind such a space. Years of mapping, coring, testing, modelling the drift of moisture, the chemistry of pore water, the slow diffusion of ions. The luxuries here are patience and observation. A borehole, the diameter of your palm, runs deep into the wall, and small instruments tucked inside measure the movement of a crack that opens and closes by the thickness of a hair over months. Another borehole samples air in the rock, noting the way it changes its mind about oxygen and carbon dioxide at a pace slower than a conversation. Engineers smiling quietly over graphs that look flat until you zoom in and suddenly see they are full of gentle tides. You walk slowly, and the corridor leads to a station where a cart sits at rest. On it, coiled cables and soft-edged cases of instruments. The cases are labelled with words like gamma and humidity, calm words that speak of observation rather than action. There is a panel on the wall, and it displays a gentle array of numbers. Temperature 26 degrees Celsius in one room, 24 in another. Humidity steady, pressure slightly higher than the outside air because the ventilation has been designed that way to keep the direction of flow gentle and predictable. You run your fingers along the edge of the panel. It is cool and smooth. The gentle rhythm continues. If you listen and your imagination leans in, you might hear something else. It is quieter than quiet. It is the sound of salt deforming. In truth, your ears do not hear it, because it is too slow to be a sound, and yet the stone is moving a little. The floors lift by small millimeters over years. The ceiling lowers the same way. The walls push in like a sleepy creature curling. The bolts and supports that the miners installed hold things in the meantime, giving the human scale time to do what it needs to do and then go home. When the repository closes, when the human phase ends, the salt will continue its slow embrace, sealing up openings, returning disturbed rock to something like its quiet baseline. Visualize the door to an emplacement tunnel. It is heavy and balanced, so it swings more easily than it looks like it should. Behind it is a room where canisters would be placed, spaced and separated to manage heat and proximity. The floor is level and softly dusty. The walls have modest arches to help distribute the load. Bolts glint in a neat rhythm along the roof. Here and there, the dust bears the faint lines of footprints from someone who last walked here hours or days ago. A thread of human presence drawn like a single pencil stroke in a large sketch. The air is a touch warmer here, a whisper of the decay heat that will be managed. That warmth is like a sleeping animal under a blanket, not stretching or stirring, just being. The packages themselves contain stories. Some are glass logs of vitrified waste, a glass that looks unremarkable, like a dark bottle glass, but holds within it a mixture that would, in other forms, wander. In the glass, the elements are held fast by the way the atoms bond, like hands linked in a very large circle. The circle does not unlock quickly. It prefers time. Other packages carry metal fuel that has been used in reactors, assemblies composed of rods that were once the bright heart of a machine. They are steady now, not shining with any visible light, not dramatic, just restfully shedding energy at a rate that decreases steadily, a sip by sip dimming. Engineers speak of half-lives and decay series with the same calm as someone describing a long, slow walk. The numbers are not frightening here. They are reminders that even energetic processes settle to quiet. The buffer materials around the packages, the clays, the concretes, the crushed rock, are chosen for their humble talents. Bentonite clay, in particular, feels soft and almost silky when dry, and when it meets water, it swells like a bread dough and enters every gap it can find. That swelling is gentle but insistent, a slow motion cushion. It blocks the drift of water and the mischievous path of any dissolving species. In a salt host rock, water is shy and rare, a few brines tucked away. If brine appears, it meets the clay and pauses. In a granite host rock, fractures carry water, but the buffer, the seals, and the depth all slow it down. The combination is not one wall. It is many small, courteous walls. Each one is transparent in the sense that it has no drama, and opaque in the sense that it does its job. You walk along a stretch where the rock changes gently. Here, there are small flecks that catch the light. There are bands that look like wood grain. A door is marked with caution tape, not because of urgency, but because inside is a calibration lab. and the equipment appreciates being undisturbed. You move on, and a smooth ramp takes you down a meter or two. The move is so soft that you feel it only as a slight change in the way your feet meet the floor. On your left, a sign shows a simple map of the drift system, like a blueprint drawn with a sleeping hand. You are here. The packages go here. The return air goes there. The shafts up to the surface are there. The emergency room is here. Everything is here and measured and relaxed. Imagine, gently, the routines that workers follow. They arrive at the surface building in the chill of morning. They check in with the smiling person at the desk who keeps track of who is below and who is above. They put on boots, helmets, lights, and the radios whose voices are polite and brief. They descend in the elevator, and for the day, they move with the purposeful ease of people who know that nothing is rushed and yet everything matters. They monitor, they place, they watch. At intervals, they take a break in a room where a kettle warms water and a table holds a few mugs that say things like "Good Rock Day" and "Keep it steady." There is a calendar on the wall, and each square is marked with tasks that have been waiting for months, and tasks that will be waiting for months after. At evening, they return to the surface, and the repository does not mind. It continues to breathe and tick and hold. When you think of pressure underground, it is easy to imagine something tense. Down here, the pressure is more like the weight of a thick blanket on a winter night. It is tidy and even, spread across structures that were designed to share it. Support bolts take some, rock arches take some, massive pillars take some. The pressure is not a clenched jaw, it is a resting palm. In salt, the pressure simply becomes movement, the slow flow that closes gaps. In clays, the pressure squeezes water and closes pores. In granite, the pressure persuades cracks to think twice about growing. The outcome of all this is a hush that continues, even when no one is listening. You come to a place where the repository opens into a larger chamber. The ceiling is comfortably high. A crane sits with its hook resting above a marked pad. The crane is quiet, as if it has been told a bedtime story. It waits for the next package to be moved with care. Nothing here whips or snaps. Every movement is like a deep breath out. The crane moves inches at a time, guided by gloved hands, obedient to slow commands. In another corner, a small robot with metal arms is parked. It does not glow. It does not threaten. It simply exists to help when a task is better done by a machine than by a person. Even the machines seem content to nap. Farther along is a door that leads to a monitoring alcove. On the other side is a room where instruments sit in racks and gently watch the repository like an old cat watches a quiet porch. They record temperatures, vibrations, humidity, the chemistry of air, and the chemistry of occasional water. When something changes, the changes whisper. A line on a chart bends slightly. A number eases upward by 1/10. There are alarms, because alarm is a part of good design. But the alarms are shy and polite, and the thresholds are chosen to give generous early reminders rather than late calls. When a threshold is met, someone comes, looks, nods, and often the correction is as simple as adjusting a flow or confirming that the slow trend is expected. Engineered barriers sit quietly here and there, like chapters of a long, delicate manual. There is a plug made of a special concrete that aligns with the rock around it. There is a clay seal that once was powder, then a compacted cake, and now is a firm, damp barrier. You can touch the concrete and feel the faint texture of the aggregates within, rounded grains that seem to purr under your fingers. The clay, protected from your touch by a sheet because it likes its own smoothness, is tempting to imagine as a cool, dense bread. When it meets moisture, it swells, and so for now, it is prepared and quiet, ready to do its work when called upon by time. Up close, the iron or copper of canisters does not seem glamorous. The surfaces are calm and matte, as if they have been designed to be uninteresting to the senses. In some designs, copper provides a very slow corrosion rate in oxygen-free water. Copper is an ancient companion, the color of sunset hidden in metal, soft enough to be formed precisely, proud enough to resist. In others, stainless steel and high nickel alloys hold their lines for decades, then centuries, then longer, the way a well-made bridge might, only without any traffic. No one pushes these materials. They are simply left to be themselves under conditions they prefer, conditions chosen because the repository knows the temperament of its residents. Imagine turning a corner and reaching a wall with a small window. The glass is thick, and behind it is a small sealed room known as a hot cell, though that phrasing sounds more passionate than the reality. If used, it is a place for handling something that would be better not handled directly. Inside, mechanical arms with pinchers mimic human hands, but with a slow, practiced grace. Today, they are still. On the bench, simple tools wait. In a drawer are notebooks. The notes are tidy and small. All of this belongs to the careful, slow choreography of this underground program. But like many of the props on a stage, they are not used continually. They are there so that if someone must act, the action is prepared and routine. The feeling that you would not spend a day here is not a critique. It is a nod to human nature. Without windows, without sky, people become gentle with themselves, and then a little impatient, and then a little dreamy. This repository is designed to be seen briefly, to be tended in small daily doses, then to be left to do its work with very little human presence at all. It is not hostile. It is just complete in its own way. You are a guest in a place that was born to be left alone, a palace for the slow processes of settling, sorption, diffusion, and decay. If you were to bring a chair and sit for hours, you would feel the calm turn into a blanket. You would close your eyes. The gentle rhythm continues. Think about diffusion for a moment. In school, diffusion is taught as the random walk of particles bouncing around. Here, diffusion is like a soft mist passing through a hedge of very fine twigs, slowed at every step by a million detours. The pore spaces in clays and cementitious materials are labyrinths the size of nanometers. A molecule or ion takes a long, wandering route, pausing often to consider the shape of the passage. Meanwhile, the clocks above ground turn weeks into months. Underground, the same journey takes years, then decades. It is comforting because it is so predictable. It is like counting heartbeats when the heart is asleep. Decades and centuries might feel immense when considered from a human life, but in rocks, they are gentle intervals. The salt here is old enough to remember seas that no longer exist. It formed as water evaporated patiently, leaving behind crystals that settled and compacted and flowed under their own weight until they became a stable world below the surface. In that time, continents moved by small distances each year, then kilometers. Mountains rose and smoothed themselves again. The salt did not mind. It simply adapted. When humans came and carved a space into it, the salt accepted the invitation to reshape. Not as a protest, as a habit. You picture it in the darkest corners, flexing by widths too small to see, like a creature that breathes once every 1,000 days. Moving gently along the corridor, you pass a niche with laminated sheets clamped under clips. The sheets show simple diagrams of how groundwater, if present, behaves. Arrows go this way and then that way. The words anoxic and reducing are printed neatly. Reducing conditions are the calm conditions, where oxygen is scarce and the chemistry is slower for many metals. The numbers that define these conditions would put many people to sleep in a classroom, which here would be a gift. Down in the niche, a pen lies next to a clipboard. It has no cap. Still, it has not dried out. Time here is diluted. Outside of salt, in granite, the repository has a different flavour, but the same quiet goal. The Swedish and Finnish plans, refined over decades, nestle their capsules in boreholes drilled downward from room floors. Each capsule rests on a small bed of bentonite. The borehole is filled back with clay like a soft plug, and the room above is lined with clay blocks and then is closed with a seal. The rock at depth is fractured, yes, but the fractures are mapped and their flows are measured with pumps and dies and pressure sensors that are patient and precise. Engineers learn which fractures are lively and which are asleep. They place their spacers in the sleeping zones. The whole effect is like laying a nest among stones in a part of the stream where the water barely moves. In clay hosts, like the thick claystone layers of some European sites, the rock itself does most of the sealing and the soft blocking of flow. The clays swell gently to fill any gaps, and over time, something called self-sealing closes the micro-fissures made by drilling. It is the rock's version of a scab forming and then smoothing itself. Such claystones are known as having very low permeability, a phrasing that might be dry, but one that sings quietly to people who draw arrows on groundwater maps. Low permeability means the water is not keen to hurry. It prefers to sit. In a repository, that preference is a lullaby. Humans deepen the lullaby by adding layers of thought. The packages are spaced to manage heat. The schedule of emplacement is arranged to pace that heat into the rock as gently as possible. If there is a small rest needed between packages, time is given without complaint. If a drift needs reinforcement before a package goes in, the reinforcement is installed without fuss. Every step is a quiet handshake, and meetings, held in a room with a whiteboard and a steady hum of the air system, end with nods and check marks rather than exclamation points. The gentle rhythm continues. Somewhere in this corridor network, a small fountain of drill cuttings fills a plastic tub, each grain like a note in an earth piano. Samples are labelled and sent for tests without urgency. The tests will look at mineralogy, at grain size distributions, at sorption capacities. Sorption is a quiet word for how ions choose to sit on mineral surfaces, not in a rush to leave. It is like a guest becoming so comfortable on a couch that their plans drift into the background. The more you imagine these processes happening in slow motion, the more the repository sounds like a library of stillness and patience. Imagine the power that once came from the fuel that is now resting. It lit neighborhoods and hospital rooms, kept factories warm and bright, and propelled ships across calm and stormy seas. That energy arrived in a burst of years. The rest, the cooling down, takes longer. That is not a tragedy. It is an accounting that respects the two sides of a ledger. Energy when needed, then time to settle. The repository is the ledger's quiet room, where the lines balance in long, even strokes. If you close your eyes while standing in the corridor, you can just make out the notion of warmth below your feet. The warmth that was half of a story and is now completing itself page by page. Not far from you, a door opens and a small team moves past, their boots gently tapping. They nod hello. Their faces are calm, their cheeks slightly pink from the cool air. They carry simple tools, a clipboard, and an infrared thermometer that looks like a toy. They speak in low, confident tones. They do not speak of fear. They speak of shifts and numbers and slow changes. One says, the reading in E12 is down by 0.3. Another says, good, that matches last month's trend. They stop at a panel, make notes, and then keep moving. Even in motion, they keep the hush intact. The repository likes that. A sign ahead explains that this area was excavated years before another area, and the rock here has had more time to settle. The sign shows nearly flat lines of displacement over the past 5 years. You run your fingers along the metal frame of the sign and feel the smoothness. In a place where so much is solid, words like creep and closure take on an almost hospitable quality. They are not crashes or breaks. They are slow embraces. A series of tiny numbers nearby marks the exact positions of reference points that laser instruments check now and then. A laser, a tiny red dot, settles exactly on a crosshair. It blinks once, almost like a wink, then goes out. Sometimes the repository must pause to let its own processes have space. A tunnel might rest empty for a year before receiving packages, simply to let the rock finish adjusting. During that time, its only companions are occasional inspections and the gentle constant of moving air. If you step into such a tunnel now, the air feels particularly undisturbed. You can almost taste the mineral softness. On your tongue, it is like the faintest memory of rain on a sidewalk. It is clean in an old, deep way. Your footsteps leave prints in the dust, like leaves pressed into clay. You might expect the concept of radiation to add a sharp edge to this scene, but even that can be soft when approached with care. Radiation is a kind of energy that moves invisibly, and because it lacks color and sound, it is best handled by instruments. Those instruments here are unexcited. They show small numbers where people work, because that is how the repository is designed. Where numbers are higher, people do not go except when necessary, and then with procedures that are as common as tying your shoes. The waste itself is not housed in open air. It is tucked into canisters, buffered, and then placed in the calm of rock. The repository is built around that calm. It does not ask workers to be brave. It asks them to be patient. The soundscape remains gentle. The fans hum. The occasional crack of a small stone fragment shifting somewhere far away sounds like a drip. Your breathing harmonizes with the fans without effort. Your shoulders drop a little. You imagine, briefly, what it would be like to lie down on the cool floor and feel the earth hold you. Then you stand again, and the corridor bends slowly to the right. Another door, another sign, another mild lamp that seems to dim itself the way evening dims a window. The gentle rhythm continues. Many repositories plan for closure, but before closure, there is a long time of operation. Operation is about receiving, monitoring, placing, and documenting. Every arrival is recorded. Every placement is documented. The documents are stored in more than one place and in more than one form. In case one form prefers a nap it cannot wake from. Even the names of rooms and drifts are chosen sensibly, often with simple letters and numbers, so that future readers who may not speak the language can still navigate the record with ease. Somewhere, in a calm office above ground, someone tends a copy of the map and writes notes in neat handwriting about what happened today and how it matched the plan and whether any small change was needed. Then come the ideas about markers, about communicating to distant future generations, to a future that might not share our words or symbols, that this place is a place to leave alone. The planning is as much about anthropology and semiotics as it is about physics and geology. What does a warning look like when the culture that sees it is new? The discussions are careful and philosophical, And even here in this gentle tale, we do not need to decide. We need only to see the thoughtfulness of it, the care with which people try to speak across a time gulf with humility. The repository itself is a better messenger than any sign. It sits deep and quiet, far from the daily pathways of people, in a place where few would wander by accident. Imagine returning to the main junction and feeling the soft familiarity of coming back to a place you've already seen. The air is a tiny bit warmer near the center, a tiny bit cooler near the shaft. A low battery on a tool chirps once like a sleepy bird, then stops as the worker who heard it plugs it into a charger. In the distance, a door closes softly. In that faintly different sound, you hear the whole building breathe in and breathe out, because each door is part of the lungs of the place. Then, after a while, you barely notice any of it. Your mind drifts to other images, the way a river eddy turns leaves in a slow circle. Sensors down here have nicknames sometimes. The staff smiles about it quietly. There is the faithful temperature pair that never misbehaves, the way a friend is always on time. There is the humidity meter that needed a little encouragement one spring, like a plant that liked a different window. Instruments, like people, appreciate being kept in their comfortable ranges. They like steady power, steady temperatures, and the absence of dust. That is one reason the repository keeps the air clean, aside from the comfort of workers. It is for the comfort of the tools that keep watch without hurrying. In one room, someone has taped a photo of a sunrise to a cabinet. The sky in that photo is full of soft peach and lavender. Underneath, someone has written a small note that says, "See you later," in a calm script. You look at the photo, then you look at the cabinet, then at the instruments, then at the wall. It becomes clear that the underground, for all its deep isolation, is not lonely. It is simply self-contained. It has everything it needs for its purpose. Humans are the guests here, slowly moving through, checking, placing, documenting, and then leaving again, like librarians who keep quiet hours to respect the silence. Sometimes the thought arises, what happens if water finds its way? The answer is not exciting. The answer is measured. The water would find clay. The clay would swell. The water would slow and spend time with minerals that do not mind small visitors. It would gain or lose a little chemistry along the way. Perhaps it would carry a whisper of something in solution. That whisper would be answered by more sorption, more spreading out so thin that the strand dissolves into background. Eventually, the water would simply be water again, with nothing to say to anyone. All of this is orchestrated by design, not by charm. Beyond the rock and its pressure, there is the slow salt. Salt has its own choreography. In some repositories, salt forms great domes, rising through softer rocks over ages, like bubbles frozen in a glass of honey. In others, salt spreads in layers, like pages in a closed book. Engineers use the pages to carve rooms with modest dimensions, aware that too large a space would invite too much movement, not in a day, not in a year, but in a time span that would be awkward for equipment. The rooms are sized like the inside of a well-made oven, keeping even temperatures and gentle flows. The slow salt moves at rates measured in millimeters per year. In human terms, ridiculous. In earth terms, a steady march. To salt, a decade is a step. To salt, a century is a stroll to the kitchen for a glass of water. The image of someone spending an entire day down here is a thought experiment that shows the mismatch between human timescales and geologic ones. You wake with a desire for sunlight, for a view of clouds, for the smell of leaves. Down here, the smell is mineral. The view is smooth wall and faithful light. After a few hours, your body would ask for a window. The repository would offer a clean indicator panel instead. After 8 hours, your mind would ask for a horizon. The repository would offer a corridor that curves gently. After 12 hours, you would ask for stars. The repository would offer the twinkle of an LED on a sensor. The exchange is not cruel. It is simply a lesson in what these places are for. They are for things that do not need windows. From time to time, the repository must rest completely, emptied of people for a few hours, to let the instruments do their calibrations and the air do its full exchanges. Those are good times to imagine action in the rock. Of course, nothing is moving quickly. Still, somewhere, a grain of salt gives way and settles a hair. Somewhere, a micro crack in granite eases shut by half of a micron. Somewhere, a clay plate in a stack of plates shifts a fraction to improve the way it shields a small pore. The repository takes advantage of the human pause to continue its eternal tasks. Then the shift begins again, and boots return to the floor, and voices return to the air, and the gentle rhythm continues. Above ground, there are records and oversight, reports that are dull in a comforting way. Boring is good when the subject is the protection of generations to come. There are inspections and visits from regulators who walk through with clipboards and calm eyes. They ask for numbers and get numbers. They ask for plans and get plans. The meetings after those visits end with handshakes and notes, not with applause, because applause would be too noisy for the nature of the work. The repository continues with the same pace as before. The staff goes home by roads lined with grass that moves in wind. The night sky comes. Stars outlast every plan, and still the plans are valuable. You reach a small alcove that looks like a classroom corner. There is a whiteboard covered in tidy arrows and boxes. The boxes show barriers. The arrows show how they connect. Waste form, canister, buffer, seals, host rock. In reality, each of these has more detail than would fit on a whiteboard. But the whiteboard version is a comfort, a map that the sleepy mind can follow without getting lost. You look at the word buffer and picture the clay swelling. You look at the word canister and picture the copper not hurrying. You look at the word host rock and picture the salt breathing in a long sigh over years. The diagram is a bedtime story that repeats its key lines until they become phrases you know by heart. There is a kind of quiet arithmetic that runs through all of this. Not an arithmetic of addition under urgent deadlines, but one of balances in slow motion. Heat is released and then spreads. It is stored for a while in rock and then dissipates. Radiological activity declines as half-lives tick past, each tick slower than a breath, each tick the same size as the one before. Pressure at a sealed plug is shared with the rock around it, and the rock accepts it. Water decides to pause, and then to pause again, and then not to travel far. The repository is a set of small calculations that never shout their results. Their results are the calmness you can feel in this walk. Midway through your visit, it is a good moment to stretch gently, to allow your mind to hover, and to leave a small trace of your presence up at the surface where the comments wait like friendly lights. Still awake. Comment the secret word, nebula. You keep moving, and the elevator shaft is now far behind. The corridor is the same, and yet each meter adds to your familiarity. Familiarity is a friend to sleep. The same lamp every 5 steps, the same neat bolts overhead, the same unhurried lap of air on your cheek. As you pass another junction, your mind drifts to the slow chemistry of the glass immobilizing the waste. Silicate networks hold elements the way a woven basket holds stones. Over eons, that basket sits without much water, and therefore it sits longer. The ideal conditions for these baskets are dry and reducing. The repository arranges those conditions with the host rock and with its design. When a little water does visit, the glass responds with a skin, an alteration layer that forms with patience, like a patina, not a collapse. The layer itself slows further change. It is a protective habit, not an excitement. At the edge of another room, you see a bench with tools organized in foam cutouts. Wrenches, screwdrivers, cutters. Each tool has a silhouette next to it to show where it belongs. Nothing dangles, nothing clangs. A small vacuum sits under the bench to collect the dust after a job, and it has a gentle purr. On the wall above the bench, a schematic shows the path of ventilation. Fresh air in blue arrows, used air in grey arrows, filters as small rectangles, fans as neat circles. The fans are not large. Their job is not to force an atmosphere to change quickly. It is to keep a slow consistency. Many repositories are in mining regions. The expertise required is a cousin to mining, but not identical. Mining removes. The repository in places and then closes. Where a mine seeks ore, the repository seeks stillness. Even the words feel different on the tongue, as if one prefers sharp syllables and the other prefers long vowels. You find yourself taking longer steps, then shorter steps, and finally the steps become invisible as you think more and more of the rock. The gentle rhythm continues. Somewhere in your thoughts, you visit Finland's project, where a granite island holds a network of drifts that grows like roots. The island is washed by the Baltic Sea, and yet the rock below is stout and considerate. Every tunnel is mapped in 3 dimensions with more precision than you might use to draw a city. The result is a space that can be navigated by someone who has never been there, because everything is stated simply. On the doorways, signs in a quiet font carry labels like 3A45 or KBS3. The staff there has refined a method over years that is as much about doing things the same calm way every time as it is about any single technical choice. Elsewhere, in the American Southwest, the salt repository sits in rock laid down by ancient seas. The access road is long and straight. The sky is often big and clear. The facility on the surface is plain and solid, a set of buildings that do not show off. Below, the rooms are wide, the salt grainy, the air dry enough that a damp cloth stiffens in minutes. In these rooms, after packages are placed, the salt is allowed to creep back, to snug up to the packages the way a careful gardener tucks soil back around a transplant. The repository speaks the language of closure slowly, and the ground, which understands that language, answers with gravity rather than with words. In any of these places, one of the subtle beauties is how human creativity is spent not on making something flashy, but on making something that disappears into its own correctness. The designs choose materials that like their surroundings, and by liking them, they last. Copper in anoxic water is content. Clay in contact with that same water is content. Salt at depth, under pressure, is content. You could almost picture a contentment index written on the whiteboard, scored with naive numerals like a child's chart of chores. In reality, there is a field of study behind each choice. The field is full of papers that count and test and argue politely, but the feeling, when you walk the corridor, is of contentment. The lighting is part of that. The color temperature is easy, not too cold, not too warm. The fixtures hide their bulbs behind frosted covers, and there are no raw spotlights. Color coding is used in a way that never announces itself. Green for safe zones, amber for caution, blue for utilities. The cables rest in trays that run along the ceiling with the quiet order of a library shelf. If you stand below one tray and trace it with your eyes, you might become a little drowsy, the way you might tracing the edge of a gentle wave. You pause at a metal door with a window. On the other side is a test vault where engineers practice installing seals. Inside, a cylinder of concrete with a diameter as wide as a car tire sits in a mock drift. The concrete is not grey, but the soft beige of limestone. It is lightly textured with tiny pores that make the surface look like bread. The test team will measure how the plug bonds to the rock, how it responds to the slow squeeze of salt or clay, how any track of possible flow through it changes over time. For a month, there might be tubes and wires and small dies that creep through on purpose for the sake of learning. After the test, the vault is cleaned and calmed. The gentle rhythm continues. There is no need for you to count minutes. The repository does not count them either. It counts cycles of inspection, cycles of placement, cycles of the Earth's breathing as seasons change above. Down here, seasons are hints. If you watch the temperature of incoming air month by month, you can see winter and summer in faint undulations. You might even sense when heavy rains fall far above, through a memory of moisture deep in the rock. But the sense is so muted that it becomes part of the drowsy background. It is like hearing the ocean in a seashell, faint and soothing. The afternoon in the surface world would come and go, and the repository would remain at its own hour. The staff would change shifts, and lamps would be checked, and floors would be swept. Tools would be logged back in. Maybe there is a tradition of quiet jokes written in tiny letters on the inside of a locker door. Someone writes, "Remember to stretch." Another writes, "Drink water." Notes like that are part kindness, part routine. They are the human side of the engineering that keeps being human, simple and regular in a place that prefers stone. Imagine opening the locker door and seeing those notes, and then closing it with a soft click. Even the click seems to respect the idea of not startling the rock. You might visit an area where the rock looks wet. Here, beyond a certain point, a natural seam allows brine to seep in droplets that hang like glass beads. No one is surprised. They were mapped long ago. The seam is diverted with a gentle trench that leads to a collection point. The brine gathers at the bottom, where it is sampled and then handled in the same unhurried way as everything else. The trench is lined with plastic and a little crushed rock. If the seam chooses a different path some year, the team will adjust the trench. There is no battle here. There is an agreement to improvise at a slow tempo. When the day on the surface turns toward evening, the repository hum might feel a little more noticeable, only because the human ear is tuned to changes. But in truth, the hum is the same. The fans turn. The numbers flicker on screens. If a soft ping from an instrument indicates a battery is low or a reading is out of the ordinary, the response is as quick as necessary and as ordinary as possible. The out of the ordinary that matters here is not sudden. It is slow divergence. The instruments are designed to see that. The workers are trained to think in long slopes rather than jumpy spikes. And this training is a comfort for tired minds. No one is asked to be a hero. They are asked to watch over a landscape of gentle curves. You might pause and think of the ground as an old friend. It has held everyone, everything. It has carried and cradled. It has absorbed heat and passed it along. It has been patient with the being and becoming of rivers and roots. In this repository, the ground adds one more service to its long list. It becomes a keeper of rest. If the phrase quiet pressure appeals to you, it is because that is exactly what this is. The pressure is balanced. The quiet is complete. The combination is what makes this place a suitable bedding for things that need to sleep for a very long time. The philosophy that underlies these repositories is called the multiple barrier concept. It is a notion of not relying on any single thing to be perfect. Instead, it relies on many things to be good, and for their goodness to overlap in a way that fills gaps. The waste form is one barrier, the canister is another, the buffer is another, the seals are another, the rock is another. None of them is alone. They interlock like the gentle fingers of people holding hands in the dark. If one finger loosens, the others still hold. The goal is not zero risk as a concept pushed by force. The goal is a lowering of risk by layers until the levels are so low that they are swallowed by the background of the world. An image comes to mind of a library at night, not an old creaky library, but a sturdy modern one with soft carpets and even lighting and rows of books that stand taller than your chest. The repository is like that library. Volumes of energy history sit on shelves that were designed to hold them. The library has librarians who visit during the day to put back a book, check the humidity, adjust a light. At night, the library continues being itself. It does not need applause. It needs its doors closed and its small lights left on their low setting. In the morning, it welcomes back the quiet feet of its caretakers. Imagine now a cross-section drawing of the repository. On top, a thin slice of soil with grass and shrubs. Below that, layers of rock, perhaps sandstone, perhaps limestone, perhaps the crystalline body. Then, deeper, the repository level, with its rooms and drifts drawn in fine lines. Lines of sensors in boreholes are little ticks. Arrows of airflow are small arrows. The scale on the side says 500 meters. At that scale, the buildings on the surface look tiny. The people are too small to draw. The lines that represent the rooms of the repository are also small, like the capillaries in a diagram of a hand. The earth is big. The repository is just large enough to hold the story it needs to hold, and no larger. You come to the end of one corridor, and there is a wall. The wall is cut cleanly. In a few years, perhaps, the wall will be opened, the drift extended. For now, the wall is a reminder that the repository grows in stages, that the work is paced not just by the placement of packages, but by the cut of the rock. Cutting rock is a craft. The noise of cutting is perhaps the loudest thing that happens here, and even that is controlled with care, done in scheduled windows, with protections that preserve the calm in the rest of the network. After the cutting, the equipment is turned off. The dust settles. The new surfaces are washed. The quiet returns like water filling a basin, smooth and flat. You step into a small side room that was once a place where samples were prepared. On a steel table, there is a tray with labeled vials. They are empty, cleaned, and turned upside down to dry. A brush sits next to them, bristles splayed gently by many uses. On the opposite wall is a paper with a simple checklist. It says things like switch off lights, close cabinets, log samples, lock door. Each line has small check marks for each day of the week. The marks are in different colours, sometimes pen, sometimes pencil. You realise that the week cycles here are the same as anywhere else. Monday has its steps. Friday has its steps. Time is not suspended. It is just slowed and widened. In a different wing, a display case is set into the wall. Inside, small specimens from the host rock catch the light in a soft way. A piece of salt looks like frozen milk. A piece of claystone looks like a slate with whispers of fossils. Not body fossils, but textures of old water. A piece of granite shows black and white and pink in tiny crystals. The card below each piece tells its age, not as a way to impress, but as a way to respect its longevity. The numbers have many zeros. The mind reads them the way the eye reads the edge of a calm pond, not to count the ripples, but to see that it is large and still. Behind a door and down a short flight of steps, there is a garage where battery vehicles are stored and maintained. They are simple vehicles with low tops and large tyres. Their paint is scratched in gentle arcs where they brushed against something. The chargers sit in a row like pillows. A toolkit on a bench is as tidy as all the others. There is a faint smell of rubber and a cleaner that is lemon-scented. The lemon smell is a visitor from the surface world. It is friendly, and it fades into the background quickly. The gentle rhythm continues. You can picture the entire repository at once if you close your eyes. A network of corridors, a few larger rooms, a handful of shafts to the surface, equipment at rest, equipment moving sometimes, the occupancy of people a fraction of the time and at a fraction of the places, sensors everywhere, like a constellation of tiny stars that blink on screens above. A computer on the surface collects the data and ticks through it in quiet loops. Once a day, the system writes a summary. It might say, all readings within expected ranges. It might list one or two that need attention, and those are looked at by someone who knows where they are without looking at a map. The repository prefers to be boring. Boring is safe. Boring is generous to sleep. As your tour carries on, you encounter a schematic of the thermal evolution of a room. It shows how the temperature near a package rises after emplacement, peaks gently, and then decays. The peak is not a sharp mountain, it is a rounded hill. The decay is not a sheer cliff, it is a slope you could sit on for an afternoon. The shapes tell you that the repository is designed to allow heat to spread and then dissipate without any single place becoming unhappy. The rock and clay are hosts that do not like surprises. The schedule is arranged to avoid surprising them. The phrase slow salt returns to your mind. The slowness is its gift. In an arch, salt does not crack loudly. It relaxes quietly. It grants stress in small amounts to the bolts. It accepts the redistribution of weight the way a mattress accepts someone lying down. Over decades, an opening narrows. Over centuries, it closes. The canisters nestled within might be cushioned by backfill, by crushed salt that recrystallizes, that reheals. The crushed grains, under pressure, sinter, a word that means they knit themselves together, like a soft biscuit recompressing. Even at that scale, the act is slow. If you were to watch it sped up like a film of a flower blooming, it would be graceful and ordinary. Someone is sweeping a corridor with a wide push broom. The bristles make a sound like a small waterfall. The person pauses at a doorway to let a colleague pass. They smile. Their eyes show an ease that comes from knowing the place well. They sweep again. Dust collects in a neat line and is lifted into the pan. Then the pan is emptied into a bin. The bin has a label, and the label is checked. Nothing escapes the comfortable habit of labels and checks. To you, this seems like a lullaby because it is repetition. Up a short set of stairs, you find a window into a surface weather station. The screen shows wind speed, temperature, humidity. These things matter because the air that enters the repository passes through these filters, through these fans, and is warmed or cooled as needed. The station's data gives small forecasts to the systems below so they can drift not too quickly up and down. The night's chill is coming, the system says, like a mother who sees a cloud and tells a child to take a sweater. The repository appreciates these small acts of care, even if it cannot say so. Another day above ground changes the pace of trucks and trains. Sometimes, shipments arrive with the predictability of a heartbeat. Sometimes, the schedule pauses because other things in the world are happening. The repository does not mind either. It is ready when needed. It is content when quiet. Packages that arrive are handled with cranes and casks that look like overbuilt thermoses. The contents do not see the light of day, for there is no reason for them to. The package is an envelope that remains sealed. The envelope is then placed in its deeper envelope of clay and rock. Layers of envelope are not a sign of secrecy. They are a sign of care. Down one corridor, you see a set of pipes and a panel with the words compressed air. Tools sometimes need air. Doors sometimes need air to seal. The air is a utility that is as calm as the rest. The pressure gauge's needle rests in the middle of the green. The green is not a bright neon. It is a pale mint. Even the choice of colour seems not to want to disturb anyone. The gentle rhythm continues. Imagine for a moment that your day has been lengthened to include a nap here. You do not lie down. You sit on a clean bench and let your eyes close. The air cools your forehead. The faint hum of fans becomes a blanket of sound. Footsteps come and go at a distance, like a slow wash of waves. When you open your eyes, only a few minutes have passed. But in the rock, some fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a degree has shifted in the balance of stresses. The repository is unbothered. It continues. Near the entrance of an emplacement room, a final check happens before a package is emplaced. The crane moves. The package is guided by gloved hands and instruments. The placement team speaks little and keeps the words standard. Words like stop, lower, hold, checked. The package rests. The alignment is verified. The documentation's updated. The temporary supports are removed. The room is cleared. The sensors quietly begin to record the small rise in temperature. The clay around the package says hello. by adjusting its water. Then the door is closed and sealed with a routine that has been practiced many times before. It is not ceremony, it is habit. There is a long tradition in underground work of drawing chalk lines. Chalk lines and paint marks show where to drill, where to cut, where to stop. Down here, the lines are small and tidy. They do not decorate, they guide. Chalk dust brushes away as easily as sleep. The paint is matte, not shiny. Shiny would be a distraction. The design is to avoid anything that looks like an invitation to hurry. Everything says, be slow, because slow is safe. As you walk farther, you feel the long curve back toward the shaft. Your steps, already calm, become calmer. You think of the story of slow salt as a bedtime story told by an old relative with a voice like velvet. Once upon a time, a sea forgot its home and left its salt behind. The salt sank and sighed and found a way to rest. Many ages later, people hollowed a space in that restfulness to pause the things that needed pausing. They brought clays that drank water and metals that were content in the absence of oxygen. They placed their sleeping parcels and left, closing doors gently, leaving signs that said, "In this place, let time work." The story has no villain. The story has a setting and a purpose and an ending that is a long fade to calm. The discipline that supports this setting involves engineers who like equations that do not change suddenly, and geologists who like maps of things that are older than entire languages. It involves regulators who like forms checked neatly and filed, and technicians who enjoy cleaning and organizing as much as measuring. It involves the feeling that making things dull is a kind of artistry when the goal is safety. You begin to love the dullness. It is not dull to your senses. It is soothing. Sometimes a repository might include demonstration rooms where visitors like you are shown parts of the design in a way that does not touch the actual operational spaces. There, a mock canister sits open to view, unsurprising in shape, a cylinder with rounded edges, not threatening, more like a gentle thermos. There, a block of bentonite is kept in a case, its surface fine and faintly green-grey, its label showing numbers about its swelling pressure, which, to sleepy minds, become like the names of mountains you pass on a train without ever leaving your seat. The demonstration room is lit softly. The small plaques are written in polite paragraphs. The chairs are comfortable. You could sit there for a long time and wish that every waiting room in the world felt as serene. The repository is a rare place where the future is taken seriously in a way that does not shout about it. It is taken seriously in measurements, in designs tested to failure in labs so that failure is far away in life, in simulations run not to scare but to plan. Achieving quiet in a system is not an accident. It is the result of practice. All the practice pays off in the moment when nothing happens, day after day. The daily nothing is the victory. It is so quiet that you do not even notice it unless you are the one counting the days, and then you smile. You begin to sense the elevator's presence again. The rush of air is slightly different here, subtly vertical, as if the corridor is near the place where the air can leave. The shaft is a column of stillness with movement inside it, like a glass of water that sits still while currents trace inside in invisible lines. A lamp near the door blinks once to show that the lift is above. You press a button. The button yields softly and returns without clack. The door whirs open. Inside, the same neat frame, the same brushed steel handrail, the same floor that barely remembers footsteps. The ride up is as gentle as the ride down. The walls pass by again, bands and seams, stone and salt, with the occasional shiny patch where the drill bit glazed the surface. You imagine the rooms behind the walls, with their tenderly placed canisters, their clays, their seals, their instruments nodding off and waking to blink a number that no one will see until morning. Imagine them sleeping. The notion might sound strange, but sleep is a good metaphor. The repository helps the waste sleep. It makes a cozy bed of rock and clay, wraps a blanket of seals and plugs, dims the lights of chemistry and physics, and lets time pull the cover up over everyone's shoulders. Breaking through the top of the shaft into the surface building might feel like stepping into daylight after a matinee. It is familiar and new. The air is brighter, busier. Cars might hum outside. Grasses might move. But even above, the repository's calm persists inside you. You keep it in your breath for a while. You return your helmet and light. A kind person at the desk smiles and checks your name off the list. There is a sink where you wash your hands, and the water runs clear and cool over fingers that have touched nothing dangerous. You dry your hands with a soft towel and feel the texture of fabric after so much smooth metal and stone. As you step outside, the sky sits broad and easy, as if it too has been filtered. The wind is a little cooler than you expected. The faint smell of dust is replaced by the smell of earth and distant leaves. Somewhere a bird calls in 3 notes, then again. The repository is below you now, quiet as a cat sleeping under a bed. It will stay like that, breathing gently, holding its parcels, feeling the small pushes of the ground and adjusting. The staff will return. The fans will keep purring. The gentle rhythm continues. You walk to the edge of the parking lot and look back at the low, sturdy buildings that mark the entrance to the world you just left. Those buildings are not dramatic. They are trim, maybe with a few windows, maybe with a flat roof. There is a sign that does its job politely. There are lights over doorways that shine with small halos at night. Even the landscaping is quiet. Maybe a row of grasses that nod in slow breezes. Maybe stones that match the local rock. Everything above ground is an extension of below. It is honest about its purpose. Driving away, you think of how deeply unamazing it is to do something amazing with this much calm. The civilization that builds this kind of sleep for its own powerful leftovers is a civilization that knows what it owes to the future. It does not shout, because shouting might wake the sleeper. It does not show off, because showing off would be heat where you need cool. Instead, it gathers the knowledge of miners, engineers, geologists, chemists, regulators, and communicates with small gestures and careful plans. The road curves, and you let the curve carry you the way the corridor did. At home, perhaps, you will rest easier knowing that below ground, in a chamber, you could draw almost from memory now, the canisters rest in their quiet. The room that holds them is cool, the air thin on dust, the fans humming, the clay a little damp and swelling enough to hug the gaps. The rock overhead and beneath and around is as indifferent as a mountain and as kind as a blanket. You would not spend a day in those rooms because the human body desires sun and changing light and the gentle chaos of leaves. The repository is not a place to be, it is a place to leave be. That is the difference that puts you to sleep with a small smile. If your thoughts wander to the future, they do so gently. Perhaps you picture a child, a long time from now, stepping on the ground far above, unaware that below is a space that once was tended with care and then was given to time to hold. The child picks a flower from a meadow. The sun glows. There is no drama. The repository does not make itself known because it does not need to. Its whole purpose is to be an unseen lullaby for the world itself. The repository will be watched for as long as it is needed. Its records will be kept. The knowledge about it will be taught. And then, in some far time, the knowledge will be a part of history, and the place will be just another piece of ground with a story beneath it. The ground will continue to have many stories. Stories of water, of roots, of ant nests and burrows, of groundhogs and moles, and all of the tiny things that make homes. Those homes are shallow. The repository's homes are deep. The two worlds coexist without disturbing each other. That is a polite arrangement, like two neighbours who share a hedge and keep it trimmed. Down below, the engineering that you saw continues like a heartbeat. Sensors check in, fans turn, doors rest, shafts stand, packages sit, clay rests, salt moves, granite holds. The pieces are at ease. In your mind's eye, the corridors are lit just enough to show the floor, and in the faint light, dust motes hover and are returned to the ground by the tiniest of breezes. Your imagination supplies a soft musical tone, the kind that might accompany the credits of a quiet film. It is the tone of equalized pressures and stabilized temperatures and plodding geochemistry. It might sound like a single sustained note on a cello, very low, very soft. In the morning, if you happen to remember this journey, you will not remember numbers or tables. You will remember the feeling of quiet pressure and slow salt. You will remember that safety can be something that does not draw attention to itself. You will remember that long plans can make short worries dissolve. And you will remember that this place was built by people whose calm was a skill. If you ever hear someone talk about the panic of such places, you might think of the broom on a corridor, of the laminated map, of the careful lift of a crane, and you might feel a small wave of peace. When sleep comes, it might come like a shaft elevator, a steady downward glide into warmth and darkness that is friendly rather than empty. In that glide, you will tuck yourself in with the same multiple barriers: a blanket, a quilt, a closed curtain, a quiet room, a steady breath. Each one helps the others until the little thoughts that move too fast begin to slow. When they slow, they spread. When they spread, they become part of the background. Then you feel held by the night, the way a canister is held by rock. You find yourself again and back at the outset, remembering that early moment when the doors closed and the elevator began to move. The sensation is circular and soothing. It tells you that endings are just soft beginnings running backward. Your breathing is easy. Your shoulder blades feel heavy in a pleasant way. Your jaw is loose. Your eyes drift behind their lids as if following a corridor that gently curves out of sight. The gentle rhythm continues. Thank you for walking slowly into the earth with me tonight, and for letting the quiet of rock and salt remind you how to rest. If this helped you unwind, feel safe, and drift, I am glad. Please consider subscribing and leaving a like so we can keep making these calm journeys. And if you want the comfort to continue on loop, the playlist in the description is waiting. Rest well now. You are safe. The world can hold itself for a while without you. Close your eyes, breathe softly, and let the earth's oldest silence carry you into sleep.